Ladies and gentlemen, today is finally the day. We're going to be taking a trip through the Switch 2 internals, see how it all comes together, check out some of the repairability on it, and find out some of the stuff Nintendo didn't necessarily tell us about their brand new system. It's been out for a bit, but I've run a bunch of experiments for using this system on a number of things. We've taken a look at the cartridges, some of the features, the Joy-Con 2s, but finally, it's time to tear down the main unit and see what we have. So if you guys enjoy the video, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. And since I'm sure many of you out there would rather protect your Switch 2 instead of disassemble it like I'm doing in this video, I want to talk very quickly about today's sponsor, that being Belkin and their travel case. And while this is their travel case and it works really well on the go, maybe you're going to work or on vacation, anything like that, this is also a good case to have just around the house, a stay-at-home case, if you will. Now, the Switch 2, you can see, is stored right in here on top of some nice felt that keeps from scratching the device at all, and in fact protects it really well. So when I've had this system in here closed up, things have fallen on it, it's been dropped off of tables and stuff. It's a very busy and hectic household when you have kids running around, so this has worked really well to protect the system in some of the busier times of the day, I'll say. You have up here 12 different slots for games that you want to keep stored. Maybe you're switching games out a lot. This way you can keep them easily accessible here. At the top, you have a nice slot for all kinds of stuff. Generally, I'll have like an extra charging cable or something like that up here. And well, as you get closer and closer to 40, I don't know what to tell you guys, but things just go missing or you forget where they are. So it is nice with this little pouch that's hidden with a nice air tag dropped in there. And if you want to learn more about the Switch 2 travel case, make sure you click the link down below in the description. And another big shout out to Belkin for sponsoring today's video. Now, I did take a look around the main system itself, and there are obvious screws that are just kind of hanging out here on the top and then on the bottom. Although with the Switch 1, we did have screws on the sides here, and as you can see, we have our blue and then we have our orange side with no obvious screws. We just have the plus and the Nintendo logo here. To my understanding, these are just stickers. So we'll have to remove these, hopefully with the ability to put them back on with the adhesive still there, and otherwise remove some of the screws that are on top. They're like Phillips head screws. They're fine point though, so you're gonna want I'll take that out. You're gonna need a pretty small Phillips head driver, something like that has a nice fine point to get in there without stripping them. Now I can already tell these stickers are gonna be a real pain to get out of there for most people. So I have like some tweezers here, for example. I think it would probably be smart to heat this up so that the adhesive comes off easier. Maybe, I'm trying to think of what I would recommend. Most people would say a hair dryer on low, but that's just blasts heat everywhere. You know, I'm gonna try to remove this without heat to see how easily it peels off. I managed to get under it here with the tweezer. It seems like it's peeling fine. Okay, good. That's not bad. Everything, all the adhesive's still on here. I think I crumpled it a little bit on the top. Yeah, unfortunately. I think when I press this down, it'll look pretty good. I think you're gonna be able to tell without too much issue if this was like taken off at any time, okay? So if you are getting a Switch used or something and you're unsure, but you get a picture, you see it's kind of crumpled at the top like that, you'll know it was taken apart for some reason. Although I guess here's the nice flip side to that. These stickers being so easy to replace, I'm sure we could have custom ones made different colors and all of a sudden you could change these out and at least do some customizing to it. I know it's minor because you have to kind of look for it, but the fact that the Joy-Con 2s are already kind of having some color changes and customization done to them, being able to just tack on some new decals really is all you would need to then complete the look is at least a nice thing we could see in the future. Otherwise though, looks like we have Phillips head screws here all along the side and that'll be on both. Also want to point out, we do have 2 screws underneath of the kickstand, and they look like they're tri-tip screws, so I thought we were there. Like, we were going to get through to having this back plate off without having to get out the tri-wing driver, but not quite. With all the screws out, it looks like it's pretty straightforward, just running a spudger, piece of plastic, I guess your fingernail even. We'll just start popping up the back here. We got the buttons, so watch out for those. Sometimes when you take the backing off, the buttons will just fall out. So otherwise, yep, there we go. Looks like it comes right off there. Kickstand goes with the backing. Flip it over. They're held in pretty well with the rubber membranes at the top. So this, if your power button or volume rock or anything gets kind of sticky, kids and stuff, I know it can happen. This is pretty easy to get to. You don't have to mess around with any of the internals. This back will come off, or if your kickstand gets damaged, it does appear that can be replaced pretty easily, as that is all part of the backing here. And you can see right here they have pretty serious hinges. That's the thing I think most people have noticed. Massive upgrade when it comes to the kickstand from the original 2017 Switch, which that was just a little piece. It got better with the OLED Switch, but if you didn't really have any experience with that at all, this is a significant step up here. And you can see the kind of the large aluminum pieces, the aluminum hinges right here that work to maintain a pretty steady base when it's being moved around. But now we have a nice look at our backing here. We have antennas running all over the place above the aluminum backing, which will be covering up our main board. And it looks like we have our micro SD slot down here. That does not appear to be, all right, good. It is not attached or soldered, I should say, to the board. You can see it looks like it runs through a cable right here. Good news, the original Switch had something similar where the micro SD card was not, the slot was not soldered to the board. This is something that could be a pretty significant fail point, as people can jam the SD card in the wrong way, for example, and just be able to replace it like this, detach it, drop a new one on, then put the back down is significantly better than having to solder these. Trust me, having to remove one of these SD card slots with hot air without melting anything and then soldering all the points down is not fun. I'm counting some antennas back here. One at the top. This would be the top left if you're looking at it. Top right for us currently, looking at the back. We have one up here, and then we have one down here. Now, these antennas will work for all kinds of stuff. Clearly, the wireless connection, Bluetooth will be involved with that, and we can see the cables running all over the place. I think because this is all on top, most likely these will be able to, I assume I could just unplug these, and then it'll lift with the backing, provided I unscrew all the antennas correctly. And guys, good tip. Before you start removing a bunch of screws, I recommend just taking a picture like this right here. Just snap a nice picture of the system with all the screws in. That way you can check it before you start putting screws in the wrong spot. Same deal when I get this aluminum backplate off. I'm gonna take a picture of the board and where the screws and components are. You can just see the antenna and the speaker just came out with a few of those screws, and it looks like this was just held down, making connection through pressure right to the board here. This then runs to our antenna that then runs all the way around here. So pretty straightforward. That will stay with the aluminum backplate, which, by the way, I will give Nintendo credit. The antenna placement is good. One up here, and then one sort of down here. I'm trying to think. I guess this one would be most susceptible, although you're going to have Joy-Cons on the side that you'll be holding. Really, the way I'm looking at it is none of these are covered up by any kind of metal that would cause interference. It's just the plastic backplate. And it doesn't seem like they're in spots where you yourself would be holding the Switch and covering them up. So that's at least a nice step up for Nintendo when it comes to their wireless connections. Okay, finally, the backing is free. There were a lot of screws. The antennas all had to be unscrewed as well, so you can get to other screws or make sure that the pieces are unplugged on the other side. This, unfortunately, was a bit more complicated than we've seen with the Switch 1, with the metal casing on the back. We have our SD card slot down here, just a couple screws, then just wanted to unplug it from the board. Otherwise, it's going with the metal casing. It's kind of taped down, it looks like. So if this is busted up, it'd be pretty straightforward to kind of just rip it off of there and then just replace it with a new one. Otherwise, though, it doesn't seem like something you really have to mess around with too much just to get this back casing off. And we do have, as you can see, some of our compound that connects this guy to the top pipe right here, the copper pipe, just for some additional cooling. Giving us a look at our battery, we have our main chipset underneath of this larger heat pipe. It is definitely a thicker heat pipe than the Switch 1 by a fair amount, actually. And then we do have our fan. Under here, we should have our LPDDR5 memory. And most likely we'll have like wireless chipsets and other things under some of these metal shieldings. We do have it looks like our game card slot up here. And it's a shame. It is soldered to the board, and that is very unfortunate because one of the cool things about the Switch 1 is it was separate. It was a modular piece, so if the game card slot broke, you could just replace it very easily. Although on the flip side, the headphone jack, which was also part of that board if I remember right, is modular. So I'm not really sure why the game card slot is not, unless it had something to do with it. The game cards are faster this generation than the previous one, and I'm not sure. Maybe it wasn't something that worked out for them with the speed difference when it came to reading the cards themselves. So maybe that's why they separated the headphone jack from it, or it was a cost-saving measure. Always very possible there. But at least with the headphone jack, you can see it just unclips here. We have one screw, it looks like, and then the whole headphone jack will just lift out and you can replace it. It looks like one of the first things you can get to after that metal shielding comes off. And I know that is a major fail point for people where the headphone can, like if you have headphones plugged in, it can break off and then it's stuck in there. And the thing always thinks headphones are plugged in. Well, let's go ahead and unplug the battery there. So don't have to worry about it turning back on randomly or something when I hit the power button. Yeah, you can see once I took that single screw out at the top, the headphone jack, once we unclip it, it's just its own modular piece. So that is at least nice, something that's easy to replace. Another thing that appears easy to replace is the microphone. That's this little guy up here that's running up the side. You can see it's on this cable. That just sits right like that. We unclip it here, and it looks like comes right out. Microphones can go bad. I've seen it in like the 3DS. That was a big one. The DS. A lot of times the reason the microphone would get damaged is because it came in contact with water. Since that is an opening, there can be something as simple as it's raining, you get some water on your Switch 2 like this, and some water gets in, hits the microphone, and then it just doesn't work, or it's very, very muffled and the system has a hard time detecting any kind of sound input. Fortunately, again, they don't run any screws for this. It's just kind of floating with this rubber grommet pushed up against the little notch to the outside. There are two connections here. These are for those outside Joy-Con connector pieces. This one sort of runs underneath the battery a bit and then up to the side here. So these are also replaceable. Remember, there's a whole thing about that. This one seems easier to replace. It doesn't deal with the battery, nothing like that. But they do have some wiggle to them still. Now, I did unscrew it, so that's part of why it's wiggling so much, but you can see it wants to like almost fall out. However, those two screws even being in there, it still has some wiggle. If you have a Switch 2, you know what I'm talking about. You can move them slightly. They were designed to at least accept some impact from the Joy-Con 2 controllers, and I really haven't seen anyone mention that theirs were broken. At least not yet. Not that that won't happen at some point as they sell millions and millions of systems. You will have some that go through some very weird situations, I'm sure. There's a strip at the top right here that has the 3 buttons: power, volume up, volume down, and then the light sensor. This is all one strip that runs down and around and plugs in here. Also modular, so if your power button gets stuck or isn't working, or the light sensor starts just messing up, you can replace this pretty easily. It does run around the side though, so you have to keep that in mind. There will be you'll have to kind of snake this cable around and make sure it sticks to the side here, but it seems pretty easy and pretty straightforward to get to. The thing that is somewhat unfortunate, the fan is not something that is accessible without removing this larger heat pipe, because you can see this one screw is sort of underneath. Otherwise, it's 3 screws, and then it does plug in. It's kind of hidden once again over here. So you will have to, at the very minimum, remove this, which is just 4 screws you can see around here. Okay, here's something important to note about this heatsink. When you take these 4 screws out, it's still gonna be kind of stuck. And I was looking around, I'm like, okay, did they kind of glue this thing at the top? A little bit, yeah. So you want to get something underneath of here and slowly just kind of work it up. And that don't just start pulling from this, because you will bend this heat pipe. The pipe itself, while it's thicker here, it is kind of thin, so it's easy to bend. But they do have what looks like almost like an adhesive strip here just to hold this down. I assume that's to stop from any kind of vibration or rattle that can happen because it's right next to the fan. Just trying to keep it as solid as possible. So not a bad idea, but just something you have to be aware of. It doesn't seem to stick easily, I'll say, to the fins here for this heat pipe. And then don't forget about the clip right here for where the fan plugs in. And otherwise, it'll lift right out and you'd be able to replace it. There's rubber grommets around the side you may have to take out and put in the new fan if yours did not come with them. But this was a major fail point that I noticed a lot for the Switch 1, whether it stopped working or there was a clog, which can happen since you have your heatsink here. there can be dust bunnies and stuff that can form, and you'll get a blockage, and then the fan will have to either work harder or it will struggle to cool it at all. At that time, your system will start to overheat a lot. This fan, at least for the Switch 1, I noticed, did have to be replaced quite frequently, at least for people who are having issues with their Switch 1. So keep that in mind. This could be something you run into. Doesn't seem so bad to replace. As you can see, after just removing the heat pipe, I could get to it, but it's also not the first thing that comes out, which is unfortunate. Oh, and I may as well talk about the battery, since that is something else that can also fail. The thing with this battery is, it is a smaller battery. Nintendo opted to not put a large battery in here, I assume because they were trying to keep the size of this unit down. And with that, they try to make the system just more efficient to compensate for a smaller battery. However, they also glued this thing down like crazy. So I would not recommend trying to remove this battery at all unless it is the problem. Like, people right now who are getting these batteries out are dropping a bunch of alcohol behind it, like rubbing alcohol, 91%, to try to like take there's glue behind it. You don't want to heat the glue like heavily because the battery can expand or get damaged from excessive heat. But you also don't want to just rip at this thing with strong adhesive, because you can also bend the battery and break it. So there's a lot going into it. My recommendation, again, unless this is your problem and you're going to replace it anyway, don't try to take it out. This is the LCD digitizer cable here, just for the front screen. Previous systems from Nintendo, I'm kind of thinking like portable systems, say 3DS or the old DS. There were multiple cables, screen, digitizer, all kinds of stuff. So it is nice we're to an age now where you just unplug one cable and that's it. Nintendo was smart enough to put screws around each charge port just for added support. The only problem I have with these charge ports is that neither of them are modular. All right, so we do not have the ability to replace these charge ports without really getting in the weeds and having to desolder them. Desoldering charge ports is not fun if you're at home. Now, if you have a hot air machine, it is easier. I've replaced many charge ports like these USB-C ones. I replaced some really crazy ones like the Vita, and it's never fun, but it is easier with hot air. But if you're at home and you just have a little soldering iron that you would have got from Radio Shack or something back in the day, it's probably not worth attempting because it's not going to go well. Anyway, the board is finally out. There was one little bit of something grabbing it back here. We have this guy that looks like it's just pressing against here. Just probably additional heating instability, or cooling, I should say, instability. Same here. Just on power management chips and stuff. They just need a little extra, and a lot of times they'll just use the body, in this case, behind the LCD here. You can see our magnets, by the way. Remember I mentioned we have magnets inside of the system. There's one here and one here. These are still very strong magnets despite being on the other side, because they are completely exposed. And the only thing that is blocking you from seeing that normally is the sticker, which is pretty thin. So that's why it's still very, very strong, despite it being disguised well, because they're still kind of pressed right up against the Joy-Cons, the metal pieces there. Oh, and real quick with the charge ports, once again, Nintendo did give us the opportunity to charge it from the top or bottom. I will recommend that if you are charging away from your dock, to just use the top port. The reason I say that is because the wear and tear or accidental destruction, we'll say, of a charge port where it gets ripped out the wrong way or something. If it's the top port, it's not really the end of the world, because you can still charge it with the bottom port and it'll still work in docked mode. Whereas if you destroy the bottom port by accident, maybe it's plugged in, someone runs past, hits the port or the charge cable and rips it off, and it's all messed up inside, you won't be able to then also dock the system. All right, so that's one of the reasons I recommend that top port. Use that just about exclusively if you're away from your Switch 2 dock, maybe traveling or something, plugging it into an external power bank. Just use the top port, as that's the one that has the least functionality between the two. I was able to remove this guy. It's a real pain to do so. It's just kind of crimped down around the sides, and you just sort of wedge something small underneath of it until the whole thing comes up. Otherwise, you just bend it back and then clip it into place, and it'll cover it up fine. Some of our compound here, it's not terribly dry. More than I would expect, though, so I'll replace that when this goes back together. But we then have our main NVIDIA chipset. Got it cleaned up pretty well there. This is our NVIDIA Tegra T239 8-core A78C CPU. We do have 2 RAM chips next to it that should make up 12 gigabytes, LPDDR5X at 128 bits. It is funny. We see all this stuff around what this system is doing right now with games like Cyberpunk, and we saw Star Wars Outlaws with pretty good port with ray tracing the whole deal. And then you look at the chip and how small it is, and it's still kind of hard to wrap your mind around what NVIDIA has been able to do, or even just these low power chips, I should say, in general. This isn't like the cutting edge low power chips that we're seeing now come out. But just what this is able to do is pretty impressive, again, with its form factor and the amount of power that it draws, which in portable mode is about 10 watts when it's really playing some of these games. And you can see compared to my Spudger, just how small the chip is. For reference, though, I have the code on top, GMLX30-A1. The other thing I wanted to find was the main storage chip, and it appears it's all the way down here by itself. Kind of unfortunate, because one of the reasons I wanted to find this is because with the Switch 1, it was a separate board. So it was removable, not necessarily something that was easy to replace for someone at home. However, for the system on a repairability side, it was nice to have that as something that's detachable and can just be changed out, even at the factory level, just so that it's something that can be fixed easily and sent back to the customer. Here, though, it's just soldered to the board. Again, I do wonder if that comes down to some of the speed conditions, because this is very fast storage for this system compared to the Switch 1, and it is comparable even to like the Xbox Series, but maybe not necessarily through a socket like that we had with the Switch 1. So that's the only thing I can think of, other than, again, the cost-saving measures. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for the Switch 2 teardown, taking a look inside what Nintendo didn't necessarily tell us about, like the cartridge slot now being soldered in, but then the headphone jack and the microphone itself being modular and easy to swap out. The thing with this is a system that is easy to repair? It does depend on what you're doing. But I will say, disassembly, once you get past that initial shock of opening the back and seeing this plate with wires running all over it, and then realizing it's actually not too bad, the system itself comes apart well enough. My recommendation, though, once again, take pictures, because these screws do vary in sizes, and you want to make sure you're not just putting the wrong screw in the wrong spot, going right through the system and hitting the screen or something. It's always possible in some of these devices with something like that happening. Otherwise, it's comparable to the Switch 1 when it comes to disassembly. I would place this at slightly more difficult, but not crazy different in terms of disassembling it versus the original Switch. So if you were fine with that one, you'll be fine with this one. But let me know what you guys think about this down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.